has a question, that makes sense.
So this is a question that kind of came up earlier. Came up earlier today. You guys can tackle it together or whatever, but I had a question from a member of the audience that asked about whether we should start a prescribed fire council in South Dakota. We've talked about it for years. There's pros and cons. I'll leave my personal opinion out of that. I think I've got personal opinions both ways, but maybe address the value of a fire council, and then how a association of PBAs, maybe like Oklahoma's got, would work within and with a fire council to balance things, and what that might look like.
All right, so the question was about difference between, or about having a prescribed fire council. Number one, I think prescribed fire councils are great. They've been around, they're in the majority of states have them. Typically what they are is where all the agencies and groups that deal and work with fire, prescribed fire, get together and do that and work together to implement anything that needs to be done. Think about training, anything like that, issues and stuff that arise about fire that needs to be done. The difference, and then I get the same question, is what's the difference between that and then like the Oklahoma Prescribed Burn Association? And the Burn Association is designed specifically to help and assist the burn associations. It's not a prescribed fire council, whereas Nebraska is under the guise of their council. On doing that, that's the way they developed it. In doing that, and the way I see that is, again, it's that our sole task for OPBA is to work with the burn associations. We would be a great member of the Oklahoma Prescribed Fire Council, so we'd be a member of it. Probably one of the biggest benefits of having opposite, because a lot of times too with a prescribed fire council, typically, again, like I said, it's made up of a lot of the agencies, whether state and or federal, and tribes. Anybody that deals with fire within your state is on that. One of the things that they cannot do typically because of their association with that, if there's any kind of laws or any kind of stuff, is they can't do any kind of lobbying to get that done. Again, you can always take part in education and trying to educate people in that situation. But that way, where you have a state association, like Brian said, they're made up of the landowners and the PBA members. They can go lobby. They're the power that comes through there, because again, that just goes to show you the strength in numbers from that burn association and the landowner membership that it is on that. I think hopefully that answered that question.
Just one follow-up then. So the model of the Nebraska Fire Council is just slightly different than most other fire councils, in that he clearly said that their council leadership is landowners. I guess, I wonder if that's replicable here or anywhere else. It seems to me it's a nice balance. But what do you think, Brian?
Yeah, so as far as I understand, and I sit on the Coalition of Prescribed Fire Councils, as far as I understand, Nebraska is the only kind of state fire council that is made up entirely of landowners. And to me, in an area like the Great Plains in this area, I think that is the best way to go. I think if we went back to 2015 when we kind of started the Nebraska Prescribed Fire Council, it might have been good to have a kind of a separate branch off of just the agency folks, because sometimes when you look at a council and you get the advisors and that come in from the agencies and organizations that come into the landowner-led, sometimes they can be overwhelmed by some of the stuff that we talk about that they don't need to talk about. So having two different organizations, one that's kind of a landowner-led, and then also another kind of uniting umbrella agency that you guys can talk about training and equipment and funding and stuff like that, where you can't really talk about that in a meeting with landowners. Like, they don't care. Like, their main goal is how do we get more fire on their landscape and stuff like that, and what are the barriers that can be removed. And then also, like John was saying, the political advocacy that they can do within the organization. Again, every organization, legitimate organization, has these councils or boards, like the corn board, cattlemen's, like, why doesn't Prescribed Fire have one? And I think we need one for not only this state, but every state. And then also, kind of an umbrella or overarching organization, kind of like the coalition, that can maybe potentially do national level advocacy for us as well.
Thank you. It looked like, unless I'm deceived, a big chunk of Nebraska didn't have a buy-in to fire. It looked like the north, central, and the western, that big grassland area, it looked like there was very little, if any, involvement. Is that correct? And what might be done there?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, the Nature Conservancy hired a person to kind of go in and help increase our burning presence, Prescribed Fire in the Sandhills. So, again, those dots don't represent, they're not represented up on that map because we're not necessarily in the Sandhills that much from a fire standpoint. But there is momentum being gained throughout the Sandhills to get more fire on landscape. But I think, one of the things that you potentially can see, one of the struggles that we have is a lot of people don't start thinking about burning until trees start affecting the bottom line. And so it makes us, the argument for fire is a little bit harder to sell for somebody that doesn't have a immediate problem. So, I think that's part of like the Great Plains Grassland Initiative, like, hey, we need to be burning before this even comes, because by the time it shows up, it's too late.
I'll just add a little bit to what Brian mentioned there, just because we're in the south central part of the state, that just across the border into Nebraska, in Boyd County, Nebraska, there's the Niobrara Valley Prescribed Fire Association, East Boyd County Burn Group. And they've probably been burning, I don't know, probably the last 40, 50 years. So that's kind of the one that's kind of somewhat close to South Dakota that's been pretty active for decades. But yeah, you're right, Rocky. Going further west, it gets a little shakier.
Yeah, and again, that map's a little bit deceiving about where fire is actually happening. Like I said, we made great strides and continue to make great strides in that region. And I know we're pouring a bunch more money. I think they're getting ready to hire another full-time person for those areas as well.
For some of us South Dakota folks that want to help get this off the ground, where would we go, and is there anyone doing it now?
In terms of,
Getting a council off of the ground and running.
yeah, so there's, you could talk to myself. We could set you up with other councils across the country too. There's a lot of members on the coalition that we can kind of give you some guidance on what we've done or what other states have done, and basically kind of look at it, and figure out what would work best for you. But, the biggest thing would be getting the landowners and getting all the agencies and NGOs together and kind of coming up with a decision on, how you guys would want to proceed, and then go from there. I think that, our fire council is, I guess 2015 we started it. We've definitely learned a lot from how things operate, and what works best and what doesn't work. So yeah, just reaching out to one of us, John, myself, we can get you, if we can't answer it, we can get you in touch with people that would know better as well. Something.
I just want to mention that in my grant, I have money for a position for if we decide to do a fire council in South Dakota. So there would be money for a coordinator if the group wants to go that direction.
Yeah, and I would actually say it's pretty important to have a coordinator to kind of help put, just the paperwork, setting up meetings and following up and all that stuff. You definitely need somebody whose job is to do that, because, as much as, like, again, the landowners on our board, they're not getting paid anything, and we are. And so I think it's important, like, they bring the stuff to us and they say, hey, you're the paid guy, go make it happen for us, and I willingly do that, so.